Joe Felz's best friend drops shocking cause of death broken loudly, and the moment those words left his mouth, the entire room seemed to stop breathing, because for weeks everyone had been operating under one assumption, and now the truth was something no one was prepared to hear. The grief had already been overwhelming for everyone who knew Joe, but learning that the story they had been told was not the full picture added an entirely different layer of devastation that his closest circle was not ready to process. Joe Felz was not a household name to the entire world, but to the people whose lives he touched, he was everything, the kind of person who walked into a room and somehow made everyone in it feel like they mattered, and that was exactly why his unexpected passing left such a massive hole in the lives of so many people. When the news first broke that Joe had passed away, the details were sparse, and in the absence of clear information, people naturally began to fill in the blanks with whatever made the most sense to them. That is what always happens when someone is taken too soon. The silence becomes a canvas for every possible explanation, and most of the time those explanations end up being wrong. But what made this situation different was that the initial understanding of what happened to Joe was not just slightly off. It was dramatically different from what his best friend would eventually come forward and reveal, and the weight of carrying that truth alone for even a short period of time was something his friend described as almost unbearable. The friendship between Joe and his best friend was not the kind of casual connection that most people accumulate over a lifetime. It was a bond forged through years of shared experiences, late-night conversations, moments of personal struggle where they held each other up, and a level of trust that neither of them had found with anyone else. So when Joe passed away and the public narrative began to form around a particular cause, his best friend found himself in an impossible position, caught between respecting the initial story that was being told and the burning need to make sure the truth was not buried along with his closest companion. For days, he wrestled with what to do, talking to family members, trying to understand the full scope of what had happened, and gradually putting together a picture that was far more complicated and far more heartbreaking than anything that had been shared publicly. What made the revelation so deeply unsettling was not just the correction of the record, but the understanding that Joe had been dealing with something far more serious and far more hidden than anyone outside his immediate circle had realized, and the fact that he had been carrying this burden largely in silence spoke volumes about the kind of person he was, someone who did not want to burden others with his pain even when that pain was threatening to consume him entirely. His best friend described the last few conversations they had together, and looking back now, he could see the signs that something was deeply wrong, small moments where Joe said things that at the time seemed like normal frustration or exhaustion, but in retrospect carried a much heavier meaning that he wishes he had recognized sooner. That is perhaps the most devastating part of any unexpected loss, the backward-looking clarity where every missed signal becomes painfully obvious, where every conversation is re-examined through a lens of desperation, searching for the moment where things could have gone differently if only someone had asked the right question or pushed a little harder or paid closer attention to what was right in front of them. The friend spoke about how Joe had always been the strong one in their group, the person who held everyone else together when things fell apart, the one who showed up for every important moment no matter what he was dealing with personally, and that exact quality of being the reliable anchor for others is what made it so easy for his struggles to go unnoticed, because when someone is always taking care of everyone else, it becomes dangerously easy to assume that they are doing fine themselves. As the details continued to emerge, the emotional weight in the room grew heavier with every sentence, because the picture being painted was not one of a sudden, unpredictable event, but rather a slow and quiet storm that had been building behind closed doors while the world outside continued to see only the version of Joe that he wanted them to see. The specific cause of death that the friend revealed was shocking not because it was bizarre or inexplicable, but because it was deeply human and tragically preventable, the kind of thing that happens when someone is suffering in ways that our society still does not talk about openly enough, and when the people around them are too caught up in the surface level of life to notice the depth of what is happening beneath. He explained that Joe had been facing a serious health situation that he had kept private from almost everyone, and the compounding effect of that physical struggle combined with the emotional toll of dealing with it alone had created a downward spiral that accelerated in ways that even Joe himself may not have fully understood until it was too late. People who had only known Joe casually began to share their own memories and interactions, and in many of those stories they too started to recognize moments where something seemed slightly off, a comment here, an expression there, a moment of uncharacteristic quiet that at the time meant nothing but now carried a devastating significance that was impossible to ignore. His best friend's courage in coming forward with the truth, even knowing that it would be emotionally devastating for himself and for others, was a testament to the depth of their bond, and his commitment to making sure that Joe was remembered not just for how he died, but for the full truth of what he endured in his final chapter, because anything less would have been a disservice to the complexity of who Joe actually was. The tragedy of Joe Felz is not just that he is no longer here, but that the full weight of what he was carrying was invisible to nearly everyone around him, hidden behind a smile and a steady presence and an unshakable commitment to being the person that others could lean on, even when he himself had nothing left to lean on. His best friend's revelation shattered the comfortable version of the story that people had accepted, but in doing so, it also opened the door for a more honest conversation about the silent battles that so many people fight every single day without anyone ever knowing. And if there is any meaning to be found in this devastating loss, it is the urgent reminder that the people who seem the strongest are sometimes the ones who are struggling the most. And that checking on the people you love is not just a kind thing to do but potentially a life-saving one. Joe Felz deserved to be seen in his fullness, not just the parts of himself that he felt comfortable showing the world. And while his best friend could not change the outcome, giving the world the truth about what really happened was the final act of love he could offer to someone who had given him so much throughout their years of friendship. And that truth, as painful as it was to hear, was exactly what Joe needed people to know.